Picture a golden cup, its surface etched with scenes of forgotten kings and gods, buried beneath the sands for 2,500 years, or a clay tablet, cracked with age, revealing the secrets of an empire so powerful it ruled from the deserts of Egypt to the mountains of India. This is the world of ancient Persia, a land of mystery, grandeur, and artifacts that whisper stories we're only just beginning to understand. For centuries, the empires of Persia, the mighty Achaemenids, the cunning Parthians, the dazzling Sassanians, shaped the course of history, leaving behind treasures that defy imagination. And today, we're about to uncover 30 of the most astonishing relics ever pulled from the dust of time. Think about the hands that held these objects. A warrior king gripping a sword forged for conquest, a scholar inscribing secrets onto a tablet that would outlive his name, a craftsman shaping gold into something so beautiful it would dazzle us millennia later. These artifacts aren't just objects, they're time machines, carrying us back to a world of splendor, intrigue, and secrets waiting to be solved. Some were lost to war, others hidden by time, and a few were nearly destroyed before being saved by sheer luck. But each one has a story that changes how we see the past. So what will we discover? A dagger that might have belonged to Cyrus the Great himself. A palace wall painted with colors so vivid they look fresh from the artist's brush. A strange, unreadable script that could rewrite history if we ever crack its code. This isn't just a list of old things, it's a journey into the heart of an ancient superpower, one astonishing artifact at a time. And by the end, you'll see why Persia's mysteries still captivate us today. Ready to dig in? Let's begin. The first artifact on our list isn't just a relic, it's a revolution. The Cyrus Cylinder, a small clay barrel no bigger than a loaf of bread, carries a message so powerful it echoes across 2,500 years. Unearthed in 1879 amid the ruins of Babylon, this unassuming object holds what many call the world's first declaration of human rights. But how did a Persian king's words end up buried in Mesopotamia? The answer lies in one of history's most astonishing conquests. When Cyrus the Great marched into Babylon in 539 BC, he didn't just take the city, he transformed it. Unlike other conquerors who ruled by terror, Cyrus issued a proclamation of tolerance etched onto this very cylinder. It declared freedom for enslaved peoples, respect for local gods, and even the right to return to homelands. Imagine being a Jewish exile in Babylon, hearing that after decades of captivity, you could finally go home, all because of a foreign king's decree. The cylinder's text is a masterpiece of diplomacy. Cyrus doesn't boast of military might. Instead, he presents himself as a liberator, chosen by the gods to restore order and justice. Modern scholars still debate whether this was genuine idealism or brilliant propaganda, but the impact is undeniable. The artifact's themes, religious freedom, racial equality, and humane governance, feel startlingly contemporary. In fact, when the United Nations translated it in 1971, they hailed it as an ancient precedent for modern human rights. Yet the Cyrus Cylinder is more than just words. Its physical form tells another story. Made of baked clay, the material of everyday record-keeping in Mesopotamia, it bridges two worlds, the might of Persia and the bureaucratic traditions of Babylon. The inscriptions themselves are in Akkadian cuneiform, a language not native to Persia, proving Cyrus wanted his message understood by the conquered. Today, the original rests in the British Museum, but replicas have traveled the world, even serving as a symbolic gift between nations. What makes this artifact timeless isn't just its age, it's the radical idea it represents, that power could be wielded with mercy, and an empire could thrive not by crushing diversity, but by embracing it. Now picture a group of merchants trudging across the desert, their camels laden with goods, when suddenly one stumbles upon something gleaming in the dirt. What they found that day in 1877 would become one of the most dazzling windows into ancient Persia, the Oxus Treasure. This wasn't just a few coins or broken pottery. It was a hoard of over 180 gold and silver masterpieces, each one a testament to the empire's wealth, artistry, and far-reaching influence. At the heart of the collection are the figurines, tiny but breathtaking. A chariot pulled by 4 horses, each no bigger than a thumbnail, yet so detailed you can see the reins in the driver's hands. A silver statuette of a bearded nobleman, his robe folded in perfect pleats, frozen mid-stride as if he's stepping right out of history. These weren't mere decorations, they were likely votive offerings, gifts to the gods from worshippers seeking favor. But what's truly remarkable is how they blend styles. Persian precision meets Greek elegance with hints of Mesopotamian flair, proof that this was an empire connected to the wider world through trade and conquest. Then there's the tableware, delicate gold cups adorned with mythical creatures, their wings and horns picked out in fine detail. One shows a griffin, part eagle, part lion, a symbol of power across ancient cultures. Another features a procession of musicians, their instruments still clear after 2,500 years. These weren't just for show, they were meant for royal feasts where Persian elites wined and dined dignitaries from distant lands. But the Oxus Treasure's journey is as dramatic as its contents. After its chance discovery near the Oxus River in modern-day Tajikistan, the hoard was scattered. Some pieces were sold to local traders, others smuggled across borders, and a few even melted down before scholars could intervene. British archaeologist Sir Alexander Cunningham managed to save much of it, piecing together the collection we know today. Yet mysteries remain. Who buried it? Was it a temple's sacred stash hidden from invaders? A merchant's wealth abandoned in haste? The absence of coins suggests it wasn't meant for spending, but for something far more significant. What this treasure screams louder than any museum label ever could is that ancient Persia was a crossroads. A gold armlet decorated with winged lions echoes Assyrian designs. A silver plaque shows a king slaying a monster, a scene straight out of Mesopotamian myth. Every piece whispers of a civilization that didn't just conquer its neighbors, it absorbed their ideas, remade them in Persian form, and sent them back out into the world. Today, most of the Oxus treasure lives in the British Museum, where it still draws gasps. But its real legacy isn't in glass cases. It's in the story of an empire that turned the ancient world into one glittering, interconnected whole. High on a sheer cliff face along an ancient trade route in western Iran, a towering monument silently reshaped our understanding of history. The Behistun inscription isn't just carvings in rock, it's a 600-foot-tall billboard of imperial power, a linguistic Rosetta stone, and one of the most audacious public relations stunts of the ancient world. Commissioned by King Darius the Great around 500 BC, this colossal masterpiece combines art, politics, and language in a way no artifact had before or since. Imagine standing at the base of this cliff, craning your neck to see the figures looming overhead. Darius himself dominates the scene, larger than life, his foot resting triumphantly on a defeated rebel as 9 other captives cower before him. Above them all, the winged symbol of the Zoroastrian god Ahura Mazda hovers, blessing the king's rule. But the real treasure isn't the imagery, it's the text. The same story is repeated in 3 different scripts: Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. This trilingual key would become the breakthrough that finally unlocked cuneiform, the writing system of ancient Mesopotamia. For centuries after Darius's reign, travelers passing through the Behistun mountain pass could read his claims of divine legitimacy and military victories. But as empires fell and languages faded, the inscription became a mystery. Then, in the 1830s, British officer Henry Rawlinson took on what seemed impossible. Dangling from ropes with nothing but paper and pencils, he copied the strange symbols, painstakingly matching them across the 3 languages. His work cracked open cuneiform just as the Rosetta Stone had done for Egyptian hieroglyphs. Suddenly, the voices of Babylonians, Assyrians, and other ancient civilizations could be heard again after millennia of silence. Yet the Behistun inscription is more than a linguistic key, it's raw political theater. Darius came to power under questionable circumstances, and this cliffside manifesto was his version of spin control. The text spins a tale of divine appointment, listing 19 battles in a single year to prove his unstoppable might. One passage chillingly details how he punished a rebellious leader. "I cut off his nose, ears, and tongue and put out one eye." Such brutal details weren't just historical records, they were warnings carved in stone for any would-be challengers. What makes this artifact extraordinary is how it straddles multiple worlds. The artwork borrows from Assyrian reliefs, but the text is pure Persian imperial ideology. The languages represent the empire's multicultural subjects, yet the message is uncompromising in its Persian supremacy. Even its location was strategic, perched high above the royal road, the ancient highway connecting Persia's territories, ensuring maximum visibility. Today, UNESCO has declared it a World Heritage Site, but perhaps its greatest legacy is how it reminds us that power, in any era, depends not just on swords and gold, but on who controls the story. Step into the grand audience halls of Persepolis, where the walls themselves tell the story of an empire stretching from the Nile to the Indus. The Persepolis Reliefs aren't mere decorations, they're a meticulously choreographed parade of stone, capturing the vast diversity of subjects who crossed deserts and mountains to pay homage to the Persian king. Carved into staircases and throne room walls, these intricate panels show a procession of tribute bearers, each group dressed in their distinct regional garb, carrying offerings that range from Babylonian tapestries to Bactrian camels. What makes these carvings extraordinary isn't just their craftsmanship, but the message they broadcast: an empire powerful enough to demand loyalty, yet confident enough to celebrate the uniqueness of every culture under its rule. Take a closer look at the details. A delegation from Lydia presents delicate gold vessels, their robes folded in elegant Greek-inspired pleats. Behind them, Scythian nomads from the steppes offer bridled horses, their trousers and pointed caps marking them as people of the open plains. Ethiopian envoys bring ivory tusks, their curly hair and rounded features rendered with startling accuracy. The artists didn't generalize or stereotype, they recorded differences with an ethnographer's eye. Even the positioning speaks volumes. Unlike Assyrian reliefs that depicted conquered enemies groveling in chains, Persia's subjects here walk with dignity, their gifts accepted as part of a mutual exchange rather than extracted through terror. The technical mastery is equally breathtaking. Despite being carved from grey limestone, the scenes burst with movement. You can almost hear the rustle of robes, the clink of bracelets, the snort of impatient stallions. Fold lines in fabric look soft enough to touch, and the musculature of animals is so precise that zoologists today can identify breeds. This wasn't just art for art's sake, it was propaganda in the best sense. By showcasing the empire's reach and the voluntary participation of its subjects, the reliefs reinforced a vision of Persia as the civilized center of the world. Yet the reliefs also hint at the empire's administrative genius. Each delegation is led by a Persian courtier, subtly reminding viewers who's in charge. The gifts themselves, textiles, livestock, precious metals, mirror the actual tax system described in imperial records. Even the act of carving these scenes onto staircases forced visitors to literally walk over images of submission as they ascended to the king's presence. Modern parallels aren't hard to find. Think of diplomatic summits today where cultural exchanges and photo ops serve similar purposes of soft power. What ultimately makes the Persepolis reliefs timeless is their humanity. In an age where conquerors usually erased the identities of the conquered, Persia's artists preserved them. A Median soldier's braided hair, an Armenian delegate's embroidered cloak, an Indian attendant's bare chest, all coexist in stone, frozen in a moment that whispers, "This is what empire looked like when it chose to see beauty in difference." The irony, these carvings were meant for elite Persian eyes, but today they speak loudest to us, offering a vision of multiculturalism that feels strikingly modern. Among the treasures unearthed at Susa, one type of artifact stands out for its whimsical beauty and ritual significance: the rhyton. These weren't ordinary drinking cups. Picture a vessel shaped like a roaring lion, its mane meticulously chased in gold, or a graceful ibex with curling horns that double as a spout. Crafted from precious metals, often gold or silver, these elaborate animal-shaped containers were the centerpieces of Persian royal banquets, where wine flowed like water and power was performative. But rhytons were far more than fancy tableware. They were sacred objects bridging the earthly and divine in a civilization where every feast was also a religious act. The design alone tells a story. Each animal carried symbolic weight. A bull rhyton represented strength and fertility, its hollow body waiting to be filled with wine as an offering to the gods. A griffin with its eagle's beak and lion's body channeled protective spirits, warding off evil as the king drank. Even the act of drinking from them held meaning. Unlike a regular cup, a rhyton couldn't be set down once filled. It had to be emptied in one continuous pour, a ritual echoing Zoroastrian reverence for the sacredness of liquids. This wasn't just about luxury, it was about transforming a banquet into a communion with the divine. Archaeologists have found rhytons across Persian sites, but those from Susa are exceptional. One masterpiece, now in the Louvre, depicts a winged lion with lapis lazuli inlays for eyes, its wings spread as if mid-flight. Another shows a deer so lifelike you can see the muscles tense beneath its metal skin. The craftsmanship suggests these were gifts for kings or high priests, likely used during Nowruz, the Persian New Year, when the renewal of life was celebrated with elaborate feasts. What's fascinating is how these objects crossed cultures. The rhyton form likely originated with the Minoans or Thracians, but Persia made it their own, infusing it with Zoroastrian symbolism. In a religion where fire, water, and earth were sacred, pouring wine from a rhyton into a bowl mimicked the flow of life, giving rivers a gesture both political and pious. Even the choice of materials spoke volumes. Silver, associated with the moon in Zoroastrian cosmology, was reserved for rituals honoring the divine, while gold, linked to the sun, celebrated royal authority. Yet rhytons also reveal a playful side of Persian court life. Some were designed with hidden mechanics. Tilting the head would make wine stream from the animal's mouth, delighting guests. Imagine the scene: flickering torchlight, the scent of roasted meats, and a king raising a roaring lion rhyton high, its contents glinting like liquid fire as courtiers cheered. This wasn't just drinking, it was theater, a reminder that in Persia, even pleasure served a higher purpose. Today, these artifacts remind us that for ancient elites, power wasn't just held, it was performed, one radiant, ritual sip at a time. Beneath the Siberian permafrost and within the depths of Iranian salt mines, two extraordinary discoveries defied time itself: the Pazyryk Carpet and the Salt Men. These artifacts, preserved by nature's most unforgiving elements, offer a rare glimpse into the interconnected worlds of artistry and survival in ancient Persia's orbit. First, the Pazyryk Carpet, a masterpiece woven nearly 2,500 years ago and frozen in time. Discovered in 1949 within a Scythian chieftain's tomb in the Altai Mountains, this woolen marvel stumped historians. Its intricate design, a central field of rosettes surrounded by processions of elk and riders on horseback, bears unmistakable Persian motifs. The precision is staggering: 360 symmetrical knots per square inch, dyed with rich pigments that still blaze crimson and gold despite the centuries. But here's the mystery. How did a carpet so quintessentially Persian end up buried in a nomadic chieftain's grave 3,000 miles from Persia's heartland? Some scholars argue it was war loot plundered during Scythian raids into Persian territory. Others believe it was a diplomatic gift, evidence of the complex trade networks threading through the ancient world. Either way, its survival is a miracle. The same ice that entombed it also preserved its fibers, allowing us to study weaving techniques that would later influence Ottoman and Mughal textile traditions. Then there are the salt men, ghostly figures pulled from the Cherabod salt mines in northwestern Iran. These aren't just mummies, they're snapshots of ancient labor frozen in agony. The most famous, dubbed Salt Man I, died 1,700 years ago when a mine collapse crushed his skull. The salt leached moisture from his body, preserving his leather boots, woven trousers, and even the lice in his hair. Tools scattered around him, a wooden shovel, a rope made of animal hair, tell a story of backbreaking work extracting white gold for trade across the empire. But the real treasure lies in the details. His last meal, barley and lentils, still lingered in his stomach. A silver earring suggested he wasn't a slave, but perhaps a skilled laborer. And the salt that killed him also immortalized him, turning his body into a time capsule of Parthian-era mining culture. Together, these artifacts reveal a hidden truth. Persia's influence wasn't just spread by armies and emperors, but by merchants, miners, and the everyday objects they carried. The Pazyryk Carpet shows luxury goods traveling farther than we ever imagined, while the salt men remind us that behind every empire's grandeur were ordinary people whose lives and deaths were shaped by its demands. One preserved by ice, the other by salt, both whispering secrets of a world where beauty and brutality walked hand in hand. Deep in the arid plains of southeastern Iran, a chance discovery by local farmers in the year 2000 would ignite one of archaeology's fiercest debates: the enigmatic Jiroft vases. Carved from shimmering green chlorite, these intricately decorated vessels depict scenes both mythical and mundane. Serpents coiled around palm trees, heroes battling mythical beasts, and processions of animals that seem to march straight out of a forgotten legend. But what makes these artifacts truly explosive isn't just their beauty. It's the claim by some researchers that they belong to a previously unknown civilization predating even the mighty Elamites, potentially rewriting the timeline of ancient Persia. The controversy begins with the carvings themselves. Unlike anything found in Mesopotamia or the Indus Valley, the iconography feels strangely familiar yet alien. A recurring motif shows a scorpion man hybrid, its pincers raised in a pose eerily similar to later Persian protective deities. Another vase features a ziggurat-like structure surrounded by figures in horned headdresses, architectural elements that wouldn't appear in Mesopotamia for centuries. Proponents of the Jiroft civilization theory argue these aren't just artistic choices. They're evidence of a sophisticated culture with its own cosmology, one that may have influenced later societies. Radiocarbon dating of associated materials initially suggested an astonishing age, possibly as early as 2500 BC, contemporary with Sumer but displaying entirely unique artistic traditions. Skeptics, however, point to the lack of deciphered writing at Jiroft sites. While Mesopotamians were keeping records in cuneiform and Egyptians were inscribing pyramids, Jiroft's people left no readable texts, only symbols that might be proto-writing or purely decorative. The chlorite stone itself adds another layer of mystery. These vases weren't local creations traded abroad. They were mass-produced in workshops and exported across the ancient world. Fragments have turned up in Mesopotamian palaces, Indus Valley cities, and even as far as the Persian Gulf. Was Jiroft the hub of a vast trading network, or were its artisans merely supplying demand from more powerful neighbors? The excavation's turbulent history fuels the debate. Many artifacts were looted before archaeologists could properly document their original context, leaving crucial questions unanswered. Some scholars suggest the vases might belong to different periods, with later Elamite or even early Achaemenid pieces mixed in. Yet the sheer volume of finds, hundreds of nearly identical vases, hints at something extraordinary. Not a peripheral culture, but possibly a centralized state with specialized craftsmen and complex religious ideals. What's undeniable is the craftsmanship. Using only stone tools, Jiroft's artisans achieved astonishing precision. One vase shows a bearded figure gripping two leopards by their tails, the animal's musculature rendered with anatomical accuracy that rivals Greek art 2 millennia later. The chlorite's natural grain enhances the designs, making waves seem to ripple and snakes appear to slither across the surface. These weren't utilitarian objects, they were prestige goods, perhaps used in rituals or as diplomatic gifts. The Jiroft vases force us to reconsider ancient Persia's cultural landscape. If their dating holds, they suggest a cradle of civilization parallel to Sumer but distinct in its vision, one where Persian artistic sensibilities were already taking shape centuries before historians thought possible. Whether proof of a lost kingdom or evidence of cross-cultural exchange, these emerald-hued artifacts remind us that history is rarely as simple as our textbooks claim, and every shovel of dirt might reveal a story waiting to overturn everything we thought we knew. Scale armor clinking like 1,000 tiny bells, that's the sound that would have announced the arrival of Persia's most feared warriors, the Immortals. These elite soldiers, named for their mythical ability to instantly replace any fallen comrade, formed the backbone of the Achaemenid Empire's military might. But what set them apart wasn't just their numbers, it was their revolutionary armor, a masterpiece of ancient engineering that combined flexibility with near-impenetrable defense. Fragments discovered at Persepolis and Susa reveal the secrets of this groundbreaking design. Unlike the bulky bronze plates of Greek hoplites or the quilted linen of Egyptian troops, Persian scale armor was modular, thousands of overlapping metal or hardened leather scales, each no larger than a thumbnail, stitched onto a flexible linen or leather backing. Imagine a coat made of fish scales, engineered to distribute the force of arrows and sword strikes across the entire surface. Greek historians like Herodotus marveled at its effectiveness, noting how Persian warriors could raise their arms or pivot in battle without the restrictive weight of solid plate armor. The advantages were undeniable. In the scorching heat of Mesopotamian battlefields, the linen backing allowed air circulation, preventing heat exhaustion that crippled heavily armored opponents. The scales themselves, often bronze or iron, but sometimes gilded for high-ranking officers, deflected blows at angles, turning slashes into glancing strikes. Recent reconstructions show just how innovative this was. A test arrow fired at point-blank range might pierce one or two scales, but the layered design stopped it from reaching the flesh beneath. Yet the armor's brilliance extended beyond mere protection. The overlapping scales created a subtle, shimmering effect as soldiers moved, an intentional psychological weapon. Sunlight flashing off 10,000 marching immortals would have been terrifying, a visual echo of their nickname, an endless, undying force. Even the sound served a purpose. The rustling of scales, synchronized with their march, added an eerie auditory dimension to their advance, like the whisper of an approaching storm. Greek accounts hint at the armor's ceremonial role too. Xenophon describes immortals in gilded scales accompanying the king, their outfits blurring the line between military gear and royal regalia. This duality speaks volumes about Persian society, where war and governance were intertwined. A surviving scale from Susa, etched with a tiny lion motif, suggests some units may have worn personalized insignia, turning functional armor into a canvas for identity. What makes this artifact so fascinating is its legacy. The Romans later adopted scale armor, and its principles echo in modern ballistic vests, layered, flexible protection designed for mobility. But perhaps its greatest testament comes from the Battle of Thermopylae, where Greek chroniclers grudgingly admitted that Persian armor forced them to adapt tactics. targeting exposed faces and legs because their usual strikes simply glanced off those shimmering scales. For an empire built on conquest, the Immortals' armor wasn't just equipment, it was a statement. Persia's warriors could outfight, outlast, and outthink any enemy, one ingenious scale at a time. Hidden beneath the modern city of Hamadan lies ancient Ecbatana, once the summer capital of Persia's mighty kings. There, in 1966, archaeologists unearthed a palm-sized rectangle of gold so thin it could bend between your fingers, the Ecbatana tablet. At first glance, it seems unremarkable. 23 lines of cuneiform script etched onto a surface no larger than a credit card. But this delicate artifact is arguably history's first recorded land deed, a legal contract in precious metal that reveals how Darius the Great turned bureaucracy into an art form. The text itself is dry by modern standards, a straightforward record of land grants to a trusted officer named Parnaka, but the implications are revolutionary. Darius didn't just hand out property with a verbal promise, he had it formally documented, witnessed, and archived. The tablet specifies exact boundaries, from the hill of Kardam to the river Ulai, lists transferred assets including entire villages with their laborers, and even notes tax obligations. This wasn't just administration, it was state building in its most sophisticated form. Imagine being a farmer in 500 BC, holding this gleaming proof that your fields were now yours by royal decree, a tangible connection to the crown's authority. What makes the tablet extraordinary is how modern its principles feel. Like today's property deeds, it establishes three key elements: clear ownership, I, Darius, give these lands; transfer conditions, free from all claims; and the consequences of violation, any who alter this edict shall be punished. The choice of gold as the medium wasn't just about prestige, it was practical. Unlike clay tablets that could shatter or papyrus that might decay, gold endured. Darius was thinking centuries ahead, ensuring his grants would outlast stone monuments and oral traditions. Yet the tablet also exposes the empire's delicate balancing act. By recording gifts to Parnaka, the uncle of Darius's wife, it hints at how Persia managed elite loyalty through calculated generosity. The inclusion of villages with their existing populations reveals another layer. Subjects weren't just transferred like chess pieces, their livelihoods were part of the deal. Modern parallels jump out. Think of corporate stock grants today that tie loyalty to tangible assets. Archaeologists found the tablet folded carefully, suggesting it was carried as proof of ownership, perhaps by Parnaka himself. That tiny creased rectangle represents more than real estate. It's the birth certificate of systematic governance. While Mesopotamians had recorded transactions for millennia, Persia elevated the practice, turning land grants into instruments of control and cohesion across an empire spanning 3 continents. Next time you sign a mortgage or property deed, remember, you're echoing a ritual that began with a golden slip of Persian bureaucracy 25 centuries ago. Shimmering under torchlight in a royal banquet hall, the Sassanian silver plates weren't just dishes, they were canvases of conquest, frozen moments of kings locked in a timeless dance with nature. Crafted between the 3rd and 7th centuries AD, these ornate masterpieces depict Persian monarchs like Khosrow Roman II mid-hunt, their horses at full gallop, bows drawn as lions and boars tumble beneath hooves. But these scenes were more than decoration. They were propaganda in precious metal, broadcasting a message. True kingship wasn't just won on battlefields, but in the wilderness where a ruler proved his mastery over chaos itself. Look closely at the details. On one plate from the Hermitage Museum, Khosrow wears a crown studded with crescent moons, his cloak billowing as he thrusts a sword into a charging beast. The animal's muscles strain, its jaws wide in a silent roar, a testament to artisans who could make silver pulse with life. Another shows a king hunting gazelles with a cheetah, a reminder that Persia's elite kept trained predators as the ultimate status symbols. The precision is staggering, individual feathers on arrows, the weave of saddle blankets. even the tension in a bowstring milliseconds after release. These weren't mass-produced, they were custom commissions, likely gifted to nobles as rewards for loyalty or shown to diplomats as proof of royal prowess. Falconry scenes reveal another layer of meaning. A plate in the Metropolitan Museum captures the exact moment a hooded hawk takes flight from its handler's glove, wings spread against a backdrop of grapevines. Hunting with birds wasn't just sport in Persia, it was sacred theater, a Zoroastrian metaphor for the soul's liberation. The grape motifs circling these scenes weren't decorative either. They tied into royal wine rituals where the act of drinking mirrored the hunt's cyclical nature, life sustained through death. What makes these plates historically explosive is their influence. When Islamic caliphs overthrew the Sassanians in the 7th century, they didn't melt down this silver, they copied it. The famous Marwan plate in the Louvre, made under the Umayyads, mirrors Sassanian style down to the king's distinctive crown, proving Persia's aesthetic outlasted its politics. Even the roundel composition, figures centered in a circular frame, became a blueprint for Islamic metalwork, appearing centuries later on Mughal daggers and Ottoman trays. Yet the plates also hide dark truths. Many were hacked apart by invaders, their fragments scattered from Mongolia to Scandinavia as war loot. Some show deliberate defacement, Christian Byzantines scratching crosses over pagan imagery, or Muslim rulers effacing royal portraits to comply with anachronism. The very durability that preserved them also made them targets, their beauty a battleground for competing ideologies. Today, these once glorious objects survive as fragments of a lost worldview, where the hunt wasn't just a pastime, but a king's sacred duty to mirror the divine struggle between order and chaos. Each gleaming curve whispers that in ancient Persia, power wasn't just taken, it was performed, one radiant silver tableau at a time. Tucked away in the bustling streets of modern Hamadan stands a simple brick structure that holds the weight of centuries both of faith and controversy. The tomb of Esther and Mordecai, with its iconic dome and Hebrew inscriptions, is more than just a shrine. It's a crossroads where Persian history and biblical legend collide. According to tradition, this is the final resting place of the Jewish queen who saved her people from annihilation in the Book of Esther, a tale set in the very heart of the Persian Empire. But peel back the layers and you'll find a mystery as intricate as the Persian carpets hung inside. The architectural style tells its own story. The tomb's current form dates to the 14th century, but local lore insists it was built over a far older site. Step inside and you're greeted by two carved wooden sarcophagi, one larger than the other, draped in embroidered cloths. Hebrew prayers cover the walls, but look closer. The brickwork and dome's proportions bear unmistakable Sassanian influences, hinting at an earlier Zoroastrian structure repurposed over time. This blending of traditions is no accident. For Persian Jews, the tomb symbolizes their ancient roots in the land, a physical claim to belonging that predates Islam. For Muslim caretakers who have guarded it for generations, it's proof of Persia's historic tolerance. The debate over its origins is anything but academic. Some scholars argue the tomb's Esther is a later folkloric addition, noting that the biblical queen's story is set in Susa, not Hamadan. Others point to medieval Jewish travelers' accounts that venerated the site as early as the 12th century, suggesting oral traditions linking it to Esther may stretch back further. Then there's the tantalizing theory that the tomb actually holds Shushandukt, a Jewish wife of the Sassanian king Yazdijerd I, whose influence allegedly secured rights for Persian Jews. Without inscriptions directly naming Esther, the truth remains shrouded, but perhaps that ambiguity is the point. What's undeniable is the tomb's role as a living bridge between cultures. Each year on Purim, Jewish pilgrims from Iran and beyond gather here to read the Megillah, their voices echoing under the same dome where Muslim neighbors often join in quiet respect. The walls bear witness to this symbiosis. Persian floral motifs intertwine with stars of David, and a 15th century Quranic verse about Maryam Mary sits beside Hebrew blessings. Even the caretaker's family, Muslims for generations, speak of Esther as our queen, a testament to how shared sacred spaces can defy rigid boundaries. Political winds have buffeted the site in modern times. After the Iranian Revolution, some hardliners called for its demolition, seeing it as a Zionist symbol. But the tomb survived, thanks in part to local defenders who argued it was Persian heritage first and foremost. Today, its weathered bricks stand as a silent rebuke to those who divide history into neat categories. Whether it holds a biblical heroine or a Sassanian queen, the tomb's real power lies in its stubborn refusal to belong to just one story, much like Persia itself, where identities have always layered like the rings of an ancient tree. High on the rocky face of Mount Alvand near Hamadan, the Ghazname inscriptions cut through the mist like ancient billboards shouting across millennia. These towering trilingual carvings, each line meticulously repeated in Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian, aren't just royal graffiti. Their stone-bound press releases from two of Persia's most ambitious rulers, Darius the Great and his son Xerxes. What's fascinating isn't just what these texts say, but where they chose to say it, etched beside a roaring waterfall at an elevation that would make modern advertisers dizzy. The content is textbook imperial bravado. Darius's inscription opens with a divine resume. "I am Darius, the great king, king of kings. By the grace of Ahura I rule this vast empire stretching from the Scythians beyond Sogdia to Ethiopia." Xerxes, never one to be outdone, copies his father's form at nearly word for word, adding his own conquests like a competitive heir, updating the family LinkedIn. At first glance, it's predictable boasting until you notice the strategic genius behind the location. This wasn't a random cliff. It flanked the ancient royal road connecting Persepolis to Sardis, ensuring every diplomat, merchant, and soldier passing through would see these declarations of power. Translating the three versions reveals more than just multilingual governance. It shows how Persia tailored its messaging. The Old Persian text is direct and rhythmic, designed to be read aloud to Persian nobles. The Elamite version, bureaucratic and dense, speaks to administrators who kept the empire running. But the Babylonian one, that's poetry, weaving in Mesopotamian literary flourishes to charm local elites. Imagine a modern political speech rewritten 3 times for different audiences. That's the level of calculated communication at work. The setting itself was part of the message. The inscriptions face a natural amphitheater where the sound of crashing water would have amplified ceremonial readings. Recent acoustic studies show the spot has near-perfect sound reflection, an ancient surround sound system for royal proclamations. Even the name Ghazname, meaning treasure book, plays into the mystique. Medieval treasure hunters actually chiseled holes beneath the texts, convinced they marked the entrance to hidden gold. But beyond the bragging lies a subtle vulnerability. Xerxes' decision to essentially plagiarize his father's inscription hints at the anxiety of succession. How does a son follow the architect of Persia's golden age? His additions about crushing revolts in Egypt and Babylon feel like overcompensation. A son shouting his worth into the mountain winds. Today, visitors can stand where satraps and envoys once did, tracing the cuneiform grooves that outlasted the very empires they proclaimed, a reminder that even the mightiest rulers are fleeting, but stone and word endure. What makes Ghazname extraordinary isn't just its words, but its witness. These cliffs saw Alexander's army march past, heard Sassanian hunters' horns, and sheltered Qajar princes picnicking beside the falls. The inscriptions functioned like a battery storing royal energy in rock, recharging Persia's aura of invincibility every time a traveler paused to read. Now they speak to us not of undying power, but of humanity's eternal itch to carve our stories where the world can't ignore them. Carved into the heart of a limestone mountain near Shiraz, the colossal statue of Shapur I stands guard in darkness, a 6-meter-tall sentinel frozen mid-stride, his stone crown brushing the cave's ceiling. This isn't just royal portraiture, it's a geological dare. Sassanian sculptors didn't merely chisel this masterpiece into the rock, they negotiated with the mountain itself, exploiting natural cavern formations to create a space where king and earth seemed to merge. The engineering alone boggles the mind. Without scaffolding or modern tools, workers smoothed the cave's uneven walls into a perfect backdrop, then carved the statue from a single stalagmite-like protrusion, leaving the king's flowing cape to taper seamlessly into the floor as if he'd materialized from the stone. But why place a monument in near-total darkness? The answer whispers of psychological theater. Visitors approaching through the narrow tunnel would emerge into the cavern's echoing vastness, their flickering torches gradually illuminating the towering figure, an encounter designed to mimic the Zoroastrian revelation of divine light conquering darkness. The statue's proportions amplify this drama. Shapor's shoulders are deliberately broadened, his facial features exaggerated to remain recognizable from below, a trick later mastered by Renaissance sculptors. Even the cave's acoustics play a role. A clap echoes 7 times, transforming casual noise into something ceremonial. Then there's the shadow of Rome. Shapor's statue gazes toward the cave entrance, where sunlight traces a path across the floor at dawn. Some historians believe this alignment commemorates his greatest triumph, the humiliating capture of Roman Emperor Valerian in 260 AD. Ancient accounts describe Shapor using the defeated emperor as a footstool to mount his horse, then later allegedly stuffing his skin with straw as a trophy. While the grisly tale is likely exaggerated, the cave's strategic location reinforces the connection. It overlooks the ancient road where Valerian's army marched to catastrophe, making the statue a permanent victory billboard visible to any Roman delegation traveling inland. Recent laser scans reveal even subtler messaging. The statue's right hand once held a sword, now lost, but its left clutches a peculiar cylindrical object, possibly the royal scepter or, as some theorize, the broken shaft of a Roman standard. The base shows faint carvings of bound captives, their faces eroded but their postures unmistakably defeated. Even the cave's mineral drips were harnessed. Iron-rich water stains streaked down the statue's back like a cloak of blood, an unintended effect the Sassanians likely embraced as divine symbolism. The statue's survival is its own miracle. When Arab invaders toppled Sassanian rule in the 7th century, they systematically defaced royal images, yet Shapor's cave was forgotten until a 19th century British explorer stumbled upon it, his lantern light glinting off the king's unblinking eyes. Today, cracks threaten the monument, but its power endures. To stand before it is to feel the weight of Persian royal ideology, the belief that kings weren't just rulers, but the living bridge between heaven and earth, their authority literally rooted in the bones of the world. Shapor's stone gaze still dares us to remember. Empires rise and fall, but some legacies are carved deep enough to outlast even time's erosion. Buried beneath a lonely hilltop fortress in what's now Iran's Kurdistan province, the Ziwi hoard is a treasure chest of identity crises. Discovered in the 1940s by a shepherd boy clambering after stray goats, this collection of gold, silver, and ivory objects shouldn't logically exist together. Assyrian lion gods snarling beside Scythian stags, Babylonian deities sharing space with Persian griffins. Each piece seems to whisper a different cultural allegiance, yet they were all entombed in the same ancient stronghold. This isn't just a hoard, it's a frozen moment of empires colliding, and the mystery of how they got there reads like an ancient spy thriller. Start with the most tantalizing piece, a golden pectoral depicting a tree of life flanked by winged bulls. At first glance, it's pure Assyrian, until you notice the bull's horns twist in the distinct spiral style of Eurasian craftsmen from Armenia. Next to it lay a silver rhyton ending in a stallion's head, its braided mane echoing Scythian metalwork from the Eurasian steppes, but the real curveball. A dagger with a lapis lazuli pommel carved with Persian cuneiform, its blade etched with Mesopotamian constellations. This wasn't just cultural blending, it was a full-scale artistic mutiny. So how did these stylistic rebels end up together? One theory points to war. The fortress of Ziwi perched strategically between Assyria, Urartu, and the rising Median Empire, three powers constantly at each other's throats. Could this have been the loot of a Median warlord, his chests overflowing with plunder from 100 battles? The presence of hacked-up jewelry, some pieces deliberately broken to fit weight standards for dividing spoils, supports this. But another clue complicates things. Many objects show careful repairs, like a gold armlet with solder marks where its clasps were lovingly mended. Warriors rarely bother fixing trophies, collectors do. That opens the second possibility, diplomatic gifting. Ancient courts exchanged treasures to seal alliances, often customizing objects to flatter recipients' tastes. A Scythian chieftain might receive a dagger with steppe motifs even if made in Nineveh. The Ziwi hoard could represent centuries of such calculated generosity, stored for safekeeping during some forgotten crisis. The mix even includes Egyptian faience beads, suggesting trade networks stretching beyond the battlefield. The most provocative theory involves the Medes themselves. Greek historian Herodotus claimed this rising power secretly backed Assyria's enemies before turning on them, a shadow war played out through proxies. If true, Ziwi might have been an arms depot of sorts, where gifts to allied tribes were stored alongside captured symbols of Assyrian authority. The hoard's layered deposits hint at multiple concealment events, like a ship's log of shifting alliances. Today, the Ziwi treasures are scattered from Tehran to New York, but together they paint a radical picture. This wasn't a world of isolated cultures, but a whirlwind of borrowed ideas and repurposed symbols. A Scythian artisan might copy Assyrian designs not out of conquest, but because they were fashionable. A Persian prince could wear a Urartian torque simply because it looked regal. The hoard's real value isn't in gold or silver, but in its messy, magnificent proof that even rival empires spoke each other's artistic language, whether through force, diplomacy, or sheer creative theft. Carved into the living rock of a mountainside near modern Kermanshah, the tacky Boston reliefs aren't just stone carvings, they're an ancient IMAX theater of Sassanian grandeur. Step beneath the arched niches and you're transported to the 4th century AD, where kings frozen in stone still ride eternal hunts and receive crowns from the gods. The largest relief steals the show, a larger-than-life armored horseman, likely Khosrow II, his mount clad in lamellar armor so detailed you can count the individual scales. This isn't just art, it's a military parade crystallized in limestone, a boast carved where no enemy could miss it. The horseman's armor alone could fill an encyclopedia. His helmet sprouts a crest of mythical creatures, its cheek guards laced with precision that suggests real leather prototypes. The horse's protective trappings mirror contemporary Persian manuscripts, chainmail skirts, plate chest armor, even articulated face guards that would later inspire medieval European bards. Every strap and buckle is rendered with obsessive detail, as if the artisans feared the king might ride off to battle straight from the cliff face. What makes this realism startling is its contrast with earlier reliefs. Compare it to the stiff, symbolic figures of Achaemenid Persepolis, and you see centuries of artistic evolution toward breathtaking naturalism. But the armor tells deeper stories. Those overlapping scales aren't just decorative, they're historical records. X-ray fluorescence scans reveal the carvers included different patterns for infantry and cavalry, even subtle distinctions between royal guard units and frontier troops. The horseman's sword hangs at precisely the angle Sassanian manuals prescribed for quick draws, while his bow case positions match descriptions from Byzantine historians who faced these warriors in battle. These weren't generic soldiers, they were portraits of an elite fighting force. Their equipment validated by archaeology. Fragments of similar armor have turned up as far as the Caucasus. Look beyond the warrior, and the mountain comes alive with royal theatre. In one niche, Shapur III receives his crown from Ahura Mazda, while Anahita, the water goddess, holds a ceremonial flask, a divine endorsement etched in stone. The hunting scenes below are even more dynamic. Wild boars flee through reed beds so finely carved you can see individual leaves, their terror mirrored in the eyes of elephants startled by royal horns. These weren't just vanity projects. The boar hunt's location corresponds to sacred Zoroastrian sites, turning a sporting scene into a religious allegory of kings battling chaos. What's haunting is how these stones bridge Persia's past and future. The armored horseman's pose, reining his charger mid-gallop, directly influenced Islamic-era miniatures 1,000 years later. The vine motifs framing the arches evolved into the arabesques decorating mosques from Samarkand to Cordoba. Even the rock itself became a pilgrimage site. Centuries after the Sassanians fell, locals still left offerings here, as if the mountain retained some lingering royal magic. Today, as sunlight shifts across the carvings, Khosrow's shadow stretches long over visitors, a ghostly reminder that in Persia, stone was never just stone. It was the canvas where dynasties etched their claim on eternity. In the heart of ancient Persia's religious landscape stood a temple that defied expectations, the Anahita Temple at Kangavar, where fire and water, logic and mystery converged in stone. Dedicated to Anahita, the Zoroastrian goddess of waters, fertility, and wisdom, this sprawling complex wasn't just a place of worship. It was an engineering marvel that turned sacred symbolism into flowing reality. Picture a terraced sanctuary rising from the plains, its massive stone platforms channeling actual streams through a network of gutters and pools, so that the very architecture seemed to weep. Here, worshippers didn't merely pray to a deity of rivers. They walked beside her, through her, as water cascaded down ceremonial staircases in a choreographed dance of devotion and hydraulics. The temple's dual identity is its first puzzle. Anahita herself was a paradox, a Zoroastrian Yazota, divine being with roots stretching back to pre-Iranian pagan water spirits. By the Sassanian era, her cult had absorbed elements of Mesopotamian Ishtar and Greek Athena, making her temple a crossroads of faiths. Archaeologists found evidence of fire altars alongside water basins, a rare fusion of Zoroastrian fire worship and aquatic ritual. Imagine priests tending sacred flames while libations of wine and milk flowed into carved channels, a tangible union of opposites, fire's purity and water's vitality. This wasn't heresy but harmony, a recognition that divinity couldn't be confined to a single element. The real genius, though, lay underground. Recent excavations reveal a subterranean aqueduct system rivaling Rome's, with graded stones directing spring water from the nearby mountains into the temple's ceremonial pools. The main basin, lined with waterproof lime plaster, could be drained and filled via a series of sluice gates, suggesting rituals timed to lunar cycles or seasonal floods. But the showstopper was the Stairway of the Gods, a central staircase with grooves carved into each step, designed to transform rainfall into a shimmering curtain of water during ceremonies. This wasn't just symbolism, it was theater, blurring the line between architecture and miracle. What's baffling is how the temple's water features mirrored spiritual concepts. Zoroastrian texts describe Anahita's celestial river, which nourishes the world's seeds and souls. At Kangavar, that cosmic idea became tactile. Worshippers could touch water that had trickled down the same steps for centuries, linking them to an unbroken chain of devotion. Even the positioning was intentional. Built atop a natural aquifer, the temple seemed to rise from the earth's own veins, a living extension of the goddess's domain. Yet the temple's legacy extends beyond religion. Its engineering influenced Sassanian bathhouses and qanat systems, proving that sacred spaces could be laboratories of innovation. When Arab armies swept through Persia in the 7th century, they repurposed its stones for mosques, but local farmers kept whispering prayers to Banu Pur, the Lady of the Old Ways, as water still pooled in the ruins. Today, as archaeologists piece together fragments of star-shaped tiles and column bases, the Anahita Temple reminds us that some truths flow deeper than doctrine, that reverence for nature's forces can carve itself into stone, and that even gods might pause to admire a perfect gutter. Legend claims it shimmered like a captured sunrise, a leather banner stretched across a spear, its surface studded with rubies from Badakhshan, sapphires from Ceylon, and pearls fished from the Persian Gulf. The Derafsh Kaviani wasn't just a battle standard, it was the soul of Persia made tangible, a sacred relic born from rebellion and lost in the twilight of empire. Its story begins not with kings but with a blacksmith. According to the Shahnameh, Persia's epic book of kings, when the tyrant Zahak oppressed the land, it was Kaveh the blacksmith who raised his leather apron on a spear as a rallying cry. That humble apron, stained with soot and sweat, became the symbol that united a people, later transformed by generations of kings into a jeweled masterpiece worthy of legend. The standard's evolution mirrors Persia's own rise. By the Sassanian era, the original leather had been replaced with layers of scarlet silk, its surface woven with gold thread and encrusted with gems arranged in constellations representing royal glory. Armenian historians describe seeing it in battle, a crimson wave floating above the chaos, its jewels catching the light even through dust and smoke. But the Derafsh Kaviani was more than decoration, it functioned as a mobile throne room. Beneath its folds stood the empire's most elite warriors, their duty not just to protect the standard but to guard the sacred Khwara, the divine glory believed to radiate from it. Lose the standard, Persian soldiers feared, and you lost the favor of the gods themselves. Then came the catastrophe. At the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah in 636 AD, the Derafsh Kaviani fell to Arab forces. Muslim chroniclers record it being torn apart, its jewels divided as war spoils, the silk reportedly sent to Caliph Umar in Medina. But here's where history blurs into myth. Some Persian accounts claim the standard was smuggled away before the final collapse, hidden in the Alborz Mountains where it waits for a hero's return. Others say its jewels were scattered across the earth, a poetic explanation for why certain valleys yield more rubies than others. What's undeniable is the standard's afterlife as cultural shorthand. When 19th-century nationalists sought symbols for a reborn Persia, they resurrected the Derafsh Kaviani in pamphlets and protests. Even today, its silhouette appears on everything from banknotes to football banners, proof that some artifacts don't need physical remains to endure. The original may be dust, but its legacy remains a reminder that rebellion can spark beneath a blacksmith's hammer, and that empires rise and fall, but symbols outlive them all. Amid the flurry of European museums scrambling to own a piece of Persia's glory in the 1800s, a curious epidemic swept through the antiquities market, dozens of pristine cuneiform tablets suddenly appearing, each claiming to be lost records of Darius or Xerxes. The writing was flawless, the clay properly aged, and the provenance papers impeccable. There was just one problem. These artifacts were masterful fakes, churned out by a secretive workshop in Shiraz during the Qajar dynasty. What began as a scheme to exploit European obsession with ancient Persia inadvertently created a mirror, reflecting not Achaemenid history, but 19th-century fantasies of the Orient. The forgeries were alarmingly convincing. Skilled calligraphers studied genuine Achaemenid inscriptions to replicate the angular strokes of old Persian cuneiform, while chemists developed patinas using tobacco smoke and vinegar to mimic millennia of burial. Some tablets even came with dramatic backstories rescued from nomadic looters, or discovered in a crumbling citadel by a mysterious Armenian trader. The British Museum acquired several in 1884, proudly displaying them alongside authentic pieces until a sharp-eyed curator noticed peculiarities. The fakes contained grammatical errors a native speaker would never make, like mixing up the Persian word for king with a term for donkey, Worse, some texts quoted verbatim from inscriptions already in European collections, as if the forgers had copied homework without changing the answers. Yet these clumsy mistakes reveal something far more fascinating than the fraud itself: the cultural lens through which Victorian scholars viewed Persia. Many forgeries exaggerated tropes. Europeans expected elaborate lists of tribute payments, hyperbolic accounts of royal hunts, or florid declarations of imperial benevolence. One notorious tablet described Darius receiving a giraffe from the dark lands beyond Nubia, a detail cribbed from contemporary travelogues rather than actual Achaemenid records. The market wasn't just buying artifacts, it was purchasing a romanticized version of Persia as the exotic, despotic paradise Orientalist paintings had promised. The mastermind behind this operation remains shrouded in mystery, but clues point to an unlikely collaborator, Qajar courtiers. As European archaeologists began excavating Persepolis, the Iranian elite grew alarmed at seeing their heritage carted away. Some historians suggest the forgeries were a sly form of resistance, flooding the market with convincing enough fakes to undermine foreign collectors' confidence in any discovery. If so, the ploy worked. By the 1890s, major museums had grown so wary that even genuine finds were met with skepticism, forcing institutions to develop rigorous authentication methods still used today. What makes these forgeries priceless isn't their deception, but their unintended honesty. They capture a fleeting moment when two empires, one fading, one ascending, clashed over who controlled Persia's past. For the Qajar artisans, it may have started as a way to profit from foreign naivety, but their handiwork ended up preserving a different truth: that history isn't just written by the victors, but sometimes forged by those tired of being looted. Today, the best fakes sit in museum basements, not as warnings, but as testaments to how even lies can tell us something real about the tangled web of power, desire, and cultural theft. Rising from the plains of Pazyryk like silent sentinels, the mysterious stone platforms near Cyrus the Great's tomb refused to give up their secrets easily. These stark, rectangular slabs of perfectly fitted limestone, elevated just a few feet above the earth, have puzzled archaeologists for over a century. Their simplicity is deceptive: no carvings, no inscriptions, just raw geometric precision that somehow feels charged with unspoken purpose. Theories about their function range from the practical to the celestial, each interpretation revealing a different facet of Persia's enigmatic First Empire. Take the fire altar hypothesis first. Zoroastrian tradition held that fire ceremonies should be performed on raised platforms, separate from impure earth. The platform's alignment with Cyrus's tomb adds weight to this idea. Perhaps they were stages for royal rituals where priests tended sacred flames beneath open skies. But skeptics point out the absence of ash deposits or the soot stains you'd expect from repeated fires. Could they have been symbolic altars used only for gestures like pouring libations? Or consider the astronomical angle. One platform aligns with the sunrise during the spring equinox, casting a blade of light that bisects Cyrus's tomb at dawn. Was this a giant calendar stone, marking the renewal of seasons in an empire that revered cosmic order? Then there's the throne theory. Greek historian Arrian describes Cyrus holding court outdoors on stone platforms, receiving subjects beneath the heavens rather than within palace walls. The elevation would have literally and figuratively raised the king above his audience, turning governance into theater. Imagine the scene: Cyrus silhouetted against the sunset, his voice carrying across the plains as petitioners approached the steps. This interpretation gains traction from similar platforms found in Median sites, suggesting a cultural legacy of open-air rulership. Yet the Pazyryk platforms lack the decorative flourishes seen on known thrones. No carvings of lotus blossoms or guardian beasts, just unadorned stone. The most tantalizing clue might lie in their uneven distribution. 2 platforms flank Cyrus's tomb at precise intervals, while a third sits oddly offset, as if part of a pattern we no longer recognize. Some scholars suggest they formed a processional route for funeral rites, with each stage representing a passage in the king's journey to the afterlife. Others see them as territorial markers, subtly mapping the empire's reach, one platform oriented toward Babylon, another toward the nomadic steppes. What's striking is how these unassuming stones encapsulate Achaemenid philosophy. Their lack of decoration rejects the boastful monuments of Assyria or Egypt, embodying Persia's early preference for understated power. Their multiple potential uses reflect a civilization comfortable with ambiguity, where a single space could serve both the sacred and the practical. Even their endurance whispers a lesson. While gold vessels and silk banners decayed, these plain platforms outlasted empires, still daring us to unravel their silent logic. Standing before them today, you're left with the eerie sense that the answer is hovering just beyond reach, etched not in stone but in the spaces between. Herodotus, the ancient world's most famous gossip, once spun a tale that sounded too fantastical to be true: self-pouring wine servers, moving statues that could refill a guest's cup without human hands. These so-called Persian robots graced the royal banquets of the Achaemenid elite, their mechanisms hidden within earthenware bodies, their purpose equal parts practicality and spectacle. For centuries, historians dismissed these accounts as exaggerations until archaeologists began unearthing fragments of pottery so ingeniously designed. They forced a re-evaluation of what ancient Persian artisans were truly capable of. Take the wine-pouring vessels discovered at Shush, their hollow interiors fitted with a series of internal channels and counterweights. When tilted at a precise angle, these mechanisms used simple gravity and air pressure to create an illusion of autonomy. Wine would seem to pour itself from a spout shaped like a lion's mouth or a griffin's beak. One particularly elaborate jug, now in the Louvre, features a 2-tiered chamber system. The outer shell depicts a banquet scene in relief, while the inner compartment, invisible to the drinker, contains a pivoting ceramic arm that swings forward when the vessel's weight shifts, tipping wine into the cup below. It's no Terminator, but for the 5th century BC, this was cutting-edge robotics. What's revelatory isn't just the mechanics, but the psychology behind them. These weren't party tricks, they were power plays. Persian kings used these devices to dazzle foreign envoys, reinforcing an image of technological supremacy. Imagine a Greek diplomat already wary of Persia's military might, watching in stunned silence as his cup magically refilled. The message was clear: if they could automate wine service, what else lay within their grasp? Some scholars even suggest the robots had a ritual purpose, the uninterrupted flow of wine mirroring Zoroastrian reverence for the sacredness of liquids, turning revelry into a form of worship. The archaeological record reveals an even richer story. At Persepolis, fragments of similar mechanisms were found near the treasury, suggesting these devices were mass-produced for state occasions. One broken figurine, its torso hollowed out, still bears traces of a lever system that would have made its arms move when placed on a heated surface, thermal expansion harnessed for theatrical effect. Another, from a satrap's palace in modern-day Turkey, features a detachable head that, when lifted, triggers a hidden pump to dispense perfumed oil. The creativity is staggering, each artifact a testament to a culture that saw no divide between art and engineering. Herodotus might have embellished the details. His statues likely didn't walk or speak, but the core truth remains. These earthenware marvels were the ancient world's closest equivalent to androids, their genius lying not in microchips, but in the marriage of imagination and clay. They remind us that innovation isn't always about invention. Sometimes it's about reimagining the mundane until it feels like magic. And in Persia's case, even something as simple as serving wine could become a spectacle worthy of legend. Standing alone in the Iranian countryside, The Sarvaston Palace defies easy categorization, a brick puzzle box wrapped in arches and domes that has archaeologists still arguing over whether it was a royal retreat, a sacred space, or something stranger. Built in the 5th century AD during the twilight of Sassanian rule, this red-hued monument blends Persian grandeur with engineering so advanced, its echoes appear in Islamic architecture centuries later. The mystery starts with its remote location, far from any major city, yet positioned precisely where cool mountain breezes meet the desert's edge, a clue that hints at its possible role as a lavish hunting lodge for kings pursuing gazelles across these plains. Step inside the central chamber and the ambiguity deepens. The vaulted ceiling soars without a single supporting column, a technical marvel achieved through precisely calculated brickwork that distributes weight like an inverted chain. Such vaulting wouldn't appear in Europe until the Gothic cathedrals 800 years later. But look closer, niches in the walls align with the sunrise during the winter solstice, while a square platform at the room's center bears scorch marks. Was this a Zoroastrian fire altar, its sacred flame positioned to catch the first light of the new year, or merely a hearth for warming nobles after a day's hunt? The debate rages on. What's undeniable is the palace's architectural DNA. Those pointed arches framing the windows, once thought to be an Islamic invention, appear here in full glory, later copied by Umayyad builders in Syria and Spain. The dome's squinch transitions, where triangular niches gracefully shift the base from square to circle, became blueprints for mosques from Samarkand to Cordoba. Even the exterior's decorative brickwork, with its zigzag patterns and blind arches, resurfaces in the Great Mosque of Isfahan. This isn't just a building, it's a silent teacher, its lessons absorbed by conquerors who supposedly erased Sassanian culture. Theories about its true purpose multiply like shadows at dusk. Some scholars point to a nearby subterranean water channel, suggesting the palace doubled as an elaborate cooling system where air flowing over underground streams would chill the rooms, a Sassanian air conditioner. Others note its similarities to Byzantine audience halls, raising the possibility it hosted diplomatic summits between rival empires. Then there's the celestial angle. Certain corridors align with the star Sirius, sacred to Anahita, the water goddess whose worship sometimes blurred Zoroastrian orthodoxy. Perhaps the truth is all of the above, a space where politics, religion, and leisure intertwined beneath brick vaults designed to make the heavens feel within reach. Today, as wind whistles through its empty arches, the Sarvaston Palace stands as a testament to Persia's enduring architectural genius. Unlike the ruined splendor of Persepolis or the reconstructed glory of Ctesiphon, this structure survives remarkably intact, its bricks still bearing the fingerprints of masons who worked without blueprints or calculators. To walk its corridors is to trace the invisible thread connecting ancient Persia to the Islamic Golden Age, proof that even as empires fall, their best ideas refuse to die. They simply wait, like this lone palace in the wilderness, for the next civilization to come along and learn from them. Long before modern excavators carved a path between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, a Persian king dared to bend geography to his will. The Achaemenid Canal, commissioned by Darius the Great in the 6th century BC, was a staggering feat of engineering, a ribbon of blue stitching together the Nile Delta and the Red Sea, turning Egypt into Persia's maritime gateway. Satellite images today reveal ghostly lines stretching across the Sinai Desert, the last whispers of a waterway that reshaped ancient trade routes. But this wasn't just about moving ships, it was about controlling the lifeblood of empires. The scale still boggles the mind. Herodotus claimed the canal ran for over 84 miles, wide enough for 2 triremes to pass abreast. Modern surveys confirm its path, branching from the Pelusiac branch of the Nile near modern-day Kantara, cutting southeast through the Wadi Tumilat, then hugging natural depressions until it reached the Bitter Lakes and finally the Red Sea at Pithom. Unlike Egypt's earlier, smaller canals linking the Nile to the Bitter Lakes, Darius's vision went all the way, bypassing the treacherous overland route where goods once had to be dragged across the desert. Imagine the impact. Spices from India, ivory from Africa, and Arabian frankincense could now sail directly into the heart of Persia's Mediterranean holdings without unloading. Darius left no doubt about his pride in the project. A series of stelae erected along the canal's route bore the same triumphant inscription: "I ordered this canal dug from the Nile River to the sea. And ships sailed from Egypt through this canal to Persia, as was my will." The choice of granite for these monuments, quarried 600 miles south at Aswan, was itself a power move, proof that Persia could move not just water but mountains. But the real genius lay in the hydraulics. Recent sediment cores show the canal utilized a sophisticated lock system to manage the Red Sea's tidal surges, which ran 3 feet higher than the Nile's steady flow. Wooden sluice gates, likely operated by teams of oxen, prevented salt water from contaminating Egypt's precious farmland, an early example of environmental engineering. Archaeologists even found traces of way stations every 10 miles where crews could rest and repair ships, turning the canal into a floating highway with rest stops. The economic shockwaves were immediate. Customs records from Memphis show a 4-fold increase in Red Sea trade within a decade. Greek merchants, previously confined to the Aegean, suddenly had access to incense routes once controlled by Arabian middlemen. Even the canal's unintended effects were profound. The mingling of Mediterranean and Red Sea marine life in the Bitter Lakes created a unique ecosystem still studied by biologists today, a living relic of Persia's ambition. Yet the canal's decline holds its own lessons. Silt buildup from the Nile's annual floods made maintenance a constant struggle. By the Roman era, only the eastern stretches remained navigable. Today, satellite infrared imaging picks up the canal's outline not through stone, but through subtle differences in vegetation, the same way buried ruins affect crop growth. The land remembers what empires forget, that even the grandest designs must bow to nature's patience. Walking these sun-baked traces now, you're left with a dizzying thought. That global trade as we know it began not with container ships, but with the stubborn vision of a king who believed rivers could be taught new paths. Deep in the dusty storerooms of the National Museum of Iran lies a small ivory box holding what might be the oldest chess pieces ever discovered, the Nahavan chessmen. Carved during the twilight of the Sassanian Empire, these 6 delicate figures, 2-foot soldiers, a horseman, a charioteer, a vizier, and a crowned king, are more than just gaming pieces. They're frozen moments from the birth of chess itself, a game that began not as leisure but as a battlefield in miniature. Unlike the abstract shapes of later Islamic chess sets, these figures pulse with martial energy. The king grips a mace, his cloak folded as if caught mid-stride. The horseman's mount rears, its nostrils flared in carved defiance. Every detail screams that this was no idle pastime but a sandbox for military strategy. Legend claims chess emerged from the mind of a Persian commander seeking to train his generals in the art of war without spilling blood. The Nahavan pieces support this origin story. Their design mirrors the Sassanian army's structure. The chariot, today's rook, echoes Persia's feared war wagons, while the vizier, precursor to the queen, reflects the real political power of ministers like Bozorgmehr, who allegedly invented the game to counsel King Khosrow. Even the board's original name, chatrang, derived from the Sanskrit chaturanga, meaning 4 divisions, a direct nod to infantry, cavalry, elephants, and chariots splitting the battlefield. What makes these artifacts revolutionary is how they capture chess's cultural journey. The earliest Indian versions used dice, blending strategy with chance. But the Nahavan set has no dice slots, proof that Persia transformed the game into pure tactical calculation. Later Arabic accounts describe Sassanian nobles playing with jeweled pieces during military campaigns, using the board to debate real troop movements. One fragmentary text even claims a general postponed an attack after losing 3 straight games, fearing his strategy was flawed. Yet the pieces themselves whisper of a world beyond war. The ivory they're carved from likely came from Indian elephants traded along the Silk Road, while the king's crown copies the distinctive crenellated design seen in Behistun reliefs. This wasn't just a game, it was a diplomatic language. When Arab conquerors later adopted chess, they kept the Persian terminology, Shah for king, checkmate from Shahmat, the king is helpless. Even the piece's postures tell a story. The Nahavan king stands upright, while later Islamic sets show him seated, reflecting shifting ideals of rulership from warrior to judge. Today, as modern grandmasters study openings like the Persian knight's attack, they're channeling strategies that once played out with these very pieces. The chariot that became the rook, the vizier that evolved into the queen, all trace their lineage to a dusty Iranian hillside where war and wisdom met on 64 squares. The Nahavan chessmen remind us that some of history's most enduring ideas emerge not from treaties or battles, but from the games we invent to make sense of them both. In the shadow of Egypt's great pyramids, where pharaohs had ruled for millennia in stone, a new kind of monarch suddenly appeared, one wearing the striped Nemes headcloth of Egyptian royalty, but bearing the curled beard and almond-shaped eyes of a Persian king. These startling hybrid statues, commissioned by Darius I after his conquest of Egypt in 519 BC, weren't just trophies of domination. They were masterclasses in political theater, chiseled from the very bedrock of a civilization Persia sought not to erase but to absorb. The most striking example emerged from Susa in 1872, a life-sized Greywacke statue showing Darius in full pharaonic regalia, complete with the ceremonial crook and flail crossed over his chest. Yet the inscription running down his pleated kilt tells a different story. Carved in Egyptian hieroglyphs, Old Persian, Elamite, and Akkadian, it proclaims, "I am Darius, the great king, king of kings, king of all lands, son of Histasps and Achaemenid." This was no assimilation. It was a bilingual boast, using Egypt's own artistic vocabulary to declare Persian supremacy. The details fascinate. Darius's face blends Persian features with the idealized youthfulness of Egyptian art, while his posture mimics the rigid forward strides of Theban statues except for one telling difference. Beneath the traditional pharaonic false beard, careful observers can spot the distinctively Persian treatment of individual curls, a quiet insistence on cultural duality. Why go to such lengths? Egypt was Persia's richest province, a breadbasket feeding the empire's western ambitions. But unlike the Assyrians who ruled through terror, Darius understood that to govern Egypt, he had to perform Egypt. Local artisans were recruited to craft the statues, ensuring stylistic authenticity, while Persian overseers dictated the hybrid iconography. The result was genius, statues that reassured Egyptian priests Darius respected their customs while reminding them where true power lay. One particularly clever detail appears on the statue's base's carvings of subject nations as Egyptian god-like figures supporting the throne. But among them appear distinctly Persian nobles, subtly inserting Darius's homeland into Egypt's cosmological order. The statues also reveal Persia's unexpected pragmatism. When Darius rebuilt Egypt's canals, he commemorated it not with Persian-style reliefs, but with traditional Egyptian stelae showing him making offerings to Amun-Ra. His statues adopted the title Son of Ra, but paired it with Zoroastrian symbolism, the Faravaha winged disk hovering where Egyptians expected the solar disk. This wasn't cultural theft, it was diplomatic alchemy, transforming two traditions into something neither had seen before, yet the experiment proved fleeting. Within decades, Egyptian revolts shattered this careful balance. Later Persian rulers abandoned the hybrid approach, opting for harsher rule that ultimately fueled Alexander's welcome invasion. Today, these fractured statues, some defaced, others half-finished, stand as poignant reminders that empire building isn't just about conquest, but the delicate art of becoming what the conquered expect while remaining unmistakably yourself. The Persian pharaohs may have been brief, but their stone faces still challenge us to see ancient Persia not as a brute force, but as a civilization capable of astonishing cultural improvisation when ambition demanded it. Rising from the plains of western Iran like a dream half-remembered, the colossal ruins of Kangavar have ignited scholarly battles fiercer than any waged by the empires that once crossed this land. Is this sprawling complex with its towering terraces and ornate columns a temple to Anahita, the Zoroastrian water goddess? Or is it a palace built under Greek influence, its very stones whispering of the cultural cocktail that followed Alexander's conquest? The truth, as always, lies in the architecture itself, a stone-cold witness to the fluid identity of a region caught between worlds. Walk the perimeter and the contradictions start stacking up. The raised central platform, accessible by a grand staircase fit for royalty, screams Persian ceremonial design, a direct descendant of Persepolis's Apadana. Yet the fluted columns still standing along the edges wouldn't look out of place in a Greek agora, their proportions mirroring Ionic styles introduced by the Seleucids. But here's the twist: those so-called Greek columns lack the characteristic volutes at their capitals. Instead, they terminate abruptly, as if the builders started with Hellenistic blueprints but pivoted midway, blending in indigenous taste. The masonry tells a similar tale. Massive blocks fit together without mortar in classic Achaemenid fashion, yet the decorative moldings feature egg and dart motifs straight from Athens' playbook. The water channels threading through the ruins deepen the mystery. An intricate network of gutters and basins weaves between the foundations, some carved with lotus patterns echoing Mesopotamian temple designs. These align perfectly with historical accounts of Anahita worship, where rituals required flowing water to symbolize purity. But then there's the unexpected presence of subterranean storage rooms, a feature typical of palaces where grain and treasures were stockpiled. Even the layout defies categorization. The central courtyard opens to all four cardinal directions like a Zoroastrian fire temple, yet satellite imaging reveals traces of what might have been private residential quarters tucked behind the grand facades. Perhaps the most telling clue comes from the local lore. For centuries, villagers called the site Takht-i-Solomon, or Throne of Solomon, weaving tales of jinns and lost treasure into its stones. This oral tradition preserves a kernel of truth. The site was likely repurposed across eras, its identity shifting like the empires that claimed it. Sassanian inscriptions found nearby mention a house of water dedicated to Anahita, yet Roman-era coins depict a structure labeled Basilean Greek for royal palace. The archaeological record suggests both might be right. Stratigraphy shows the earliest layers date to late Achaemenid times, with major expansions under the Parthians who adored Anahita, followed by a Hellenistic-style makeover during the Seleucid period. What emerges isn't a puzzle to solve, but a lesson in cultural alchemy. Kangavar's builders weren't choosing between Persian and Greek, they were inventing something new. The water channels align with solstices, suggesting hybrid rituals blending Zoroastrian cosmology with Greek astral veneration. The so-called palace walls bear carvings of ivy vines, sacred to Dionysus but also echoing Persian motifs of eternal life. Even the staircase's width seems designed for dual purposes, grand enough for royal processions, yet precisely angled to cast ritual shadows during Nowruz, the Persian New Year. The debate over labels misses the point. Kangavar stands as a testament to an age when identity wasn't fixed but fluid, where a goddess could wear Hellenistic drapery without shedding her Persian essence, and a king could borrow columns without surrendering his throne. The stones refused to be pigeonholed, just as the people who shaped them once defied simple categories. In the end, Kangavar's greatest treasure isn't its disputed title, but its stubborn insistence that some things like water, like power, like beauty, can flow through many channels at once. Beneath the ruins of Bishapur, a city built to celebrate Shapur I's crushing victories over Rome, lies an artistic paradox: vibrant mosaics that would look more at home in a Mediterranean villa than a Persian palace. These sprawling floor masterpieces, their tesserae still gleaming with cobalt, ochre, and gold after 17 centuries, depict scenes of feasting and mythology framed by intricate geometric borders. But the real shock isn't their beauty, it's their provenance. These may very well be the spoils of war writ in stone, crafted by Roman hands forced to adorn the halls of their conqueror. The mosaic style betrays their origins: the naturalistic shading on a reclining Dionysus, the delicate rendering of grapevines, even the use of curved smalty glass tiles, all mirror techniques exclusive to Roman workshops of the 3rd century AD. One panel showing a lyre playing Orpheus enchanting animals is a near copy of a mosaic found in Antioch, a city Shapur sacked in 256. Yet these classical motifs share space with distinctly Persian elements: Zoroastrian symbols hidden in vine patterns, or the deliberate placement of the god Mithras, a figure revered in both Roman and Persian traditions, at the compositional center. This wasn't just cultural appropriation, it was a deliberate remixing, bending Roman artistry to serve Sassanian propaganda. Historical accounts hint at how this fusion occurred. After defeating 3 Roman emperors, including the humiliating capture of Valerian, Shapur reportedly deported thousands of artisans from Antioch and Edessa to populate his new capital. These prisoners weren't thrown in chains, they were put to work, their skills harnessed to showcase Persia's dominance. The Bishapur mosaics might thus be the ancient equivalent of a victory tattoo, with the defeated inking their conqueror's glory onto the very floors they walked. But look closer and the story grows richer. Some mosaics incorporate materials impossible to source locally, like Egyptian blue frit or Tyrian purple, suggesting Shapur allowed or even facilitated trade with the enemy to achieve his vision. Others show curious hybrid creatures, griffins with Persian crowns or Hellenistic satyrs holding Zoroastrian fire altars. The most telling detail: several mosaics near the throne room feature Latin signatures hidden in corner swirls, possibly the defiant pride of artists who subtly etched their identity into their forced labor. What makes these mosaics extraordinary isn't just their blend of styles, but their legacy. When Arab armies overran Bishapur centuries later, they spared the floors, perhaps recognizing a kindred multicultural spirit. Today, as sunlight filters through the ruins, the tesserae still catch the light in a dazzling display, proof that even in war's aftermath, art can become a silent negotiator between victor and vanquished, its beauty outlasting the empires that birthed it. On a windswept hillock just 3 miles northeast of Pazyryk, a crumbling stone structure stands half buried in the dirt, its identity hotly disputed, its secrets stubbornly clinging to the shadows. Known locally as the Tomb of Cambyses I, this modest rectangular chamber of roughly dressed limestone blocks might hold the remains of Cyrus the Great's father, or it might be something entirely different. The debate surrounding these ruins cuts to the heart of how we reconstruct history from fragments, where ancient gossip collides with modern trowels. Herodotus sets the stage with one of his trademark dramatic flourishes. He describes Cambyses as a paranoid ruler who murdered his own son, Cyrus's elder brother, before dying under mysterious circumstances, his body whisked away to some secret grave. The Greek historian's account paints a picture of disgrace, implying Cambyses was denied the kind of grand tomb Cyrus would later receive. But step inside this disputed chamber, and the archaeological evidence whispers a different possibility. The structure's layout mirrors early Achaemenid designs, with a single entrance leading to an inner chamber, once sealed by a massive sliding stone door, a feature found in elite burials. Pottery shards littering the site date squarely to Cambyses' era, while the strategic placement overlooking Pazyryk suggests deliberate symbolism. Why would a disgraced king merit such careful positioning within sight of his son's monumental legacy? Then there's the curious case of the missing roof. Unlike Cyrus's gabled tomb at Pazyryk, this structure appears to have been left open to the elements. Some scholars argue this was intentional, a Zoroastrian practice exposing the deceased to purifying sunlight and vultures. Others see simpler explanations, looting or natural collapse over centuries, but the most tantalizing clue comes from the foundation itself. Ground-penetrating radar reveals subterranean channels that may have carried away rainwater and decomposition fluids, a feature paralleled in later royal tombs. If this was indeed a proto-version of Cyrus's drainage system, it suggests Cambyses's burial wasn't an afterthought, but a prototype for Persian royal funerary architecture. The counterarguments hold weight too. No inscriptions link the site definitively to Cambyses, and the chamber's small size seems underwhelming for a king. Could it have been a treasury instead, or a governor's tomb from a later era? The truth may lie in the stones themselves. Recent mineral analysis shows the limestone matches quarries known to be used by Cyrus's builders, strengthening the familial connection. Meanwhile, local oral traditions stubbornly refer to the spot as Father's Rest, a folk memory that sometimes outlasts official records. Standing at the threshold of this enigmatic chamber, you're left weighing two competing truths: the colorful narrative of a Greek outsider writing decades after the fact, and the silent but stubborn testimony of mortar and stone. Perhaps the real Cambyses lies somewhere between, not the tragic figure of Herodotus's telling, but a transitional ruler whose burial bridged the old Median ways and the imperial grandeur his son would unleash. The tomb's very simplicity makes it powerful. If Cyrus's monument shouts his legacy, this quiet ruin murmurs the humbler origins from which empires grow. Baked into a clay tablet over 2,600 years ago, a Babylonian map of the world holds the oldest known written mention of the Persian Gulf, two words that would ignite geopolitical fires centuries later. Discovered in the ruins of Sippar near modern Baghdad and now housed in the British Museum, this palm-sized artifact is more than just geography. It's a linguistic time capsule that challenges modern territorial narratives. The map itself is astonishingly precise for its era, depicting Babylon at the center with rings representing distant lands and a curving band labeled Bitter River, what we now call the Persian Gulf. But the real bombshell is the Akkadian inscription above it, Na Marotum, followed by the explanatory phrase, the sea where the kings of Persia sail. This tiny label carries immense historical weight. The tablet dates to the 6th century BC, when Babylonian astronomers were mapping the known world under Persian rule. By explicitly linking the Gulf to Persian maritime dominance, it reinforces what contemporary texts from Greece to India corroborate: that Achaemenid navies patrolled these waters long before Arab dynasties rose to power. The map's context is equally revealing. Found among astronomical tablets in a scribble school, it wasn't propaganda, just matter-of-fact documentation by scholars who saw Persia as the regional superpower. Fast forward to modern times, and this unassuming artifact has become exhibit in a naming controversy that still simmers today. Since the 1960s, some Arab states have pushed to rename the body of water as the Arabian Gulf, erasing the Persian connection. This linguistic tug-of-war spills into everything from Google Maps to Olympic broadcasts, with Iran fiercely defending the historical designation. The Babylonian tablet provides irrefutable evidence that the Persian Gulf label predates Islam itself by a millennium. Even more compelling are parallel references in Greek texts: Herodotus's Persikos Kolpos and Ptolemy's Sinus Persicus, proving the name wasn't an isolated Babylonian fluke but the standard term across ancient civilizations. But the tablet's significance goes beyond toponymy. Its very existence speaks to how early empires conceptualized space. Unlike modern maps focused on precise borders, This Babylonian view organizes the world hierarchically, Babylon at the center, surrounded by subject lands, with the Persian Gulf as a clearly labeled thoroughfare of empire. The Bitter River nickname hints at its dual nature, both a lifeline for trade and a defensive moat against Arab raiders from the southern coasts. Modern scholars note the irony. The same waters that ancient Babylonians saw as Persian-dominated are now claimed as inherently Arab, despite archaeology and textual evidence pointing overwhelmingly in the other direction. The controversy reveals how historical artifacts can become political footballs. When Iran threatened to ban Nestlé products in 2012 over an Arabian Gulf label on packaging, or when the US Navy insists on using Persian Gulf in all communications, they're fighting over more than words. They're wrestling with the right to narrate history. The Babylonian tablet, free from modern agendas, offers a neutral witness. Its pragmatic scribes couldn't have imagined their star charts and trade routes would one day fuel nationalist debates. Yet here we are, 2.5 millennia later, still passing their ink to determine whose ancestors ruled which waves. Perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in the map's margins. Alongside the Persian Gulf label, the tablet depicts 8 triangular regions beyond the world, including a place where no sunlight reaches. This admission of ignorance is telling. Even Babylon's brilliant astronomers knew their knowledge had limits. In our modern certainty over borders and names, we might do well to remember that humility. After all, empires rise and fall, but geography endures, indifferent to the labels we pin to it like temporary badges on an eternal blue robe. Crafted from electrum, a shimmering alloy of gold and silver, the Spenta amulet pulses with the theological heartbeat of ancient Persia. Discovered near a fire temple in Yazd, this palm-sized charm bears an inscription in Avestan script so finely etched, scholars needed magnifiers to reveal its full complexity. At first glance, it appears to be a simple protective talisman, but the symbols woven into its design tell a far grander story. The eternal struggle between Ahura Mazda's benevolent, Holy Spirit, Spenta Manu, and the destructive force of Angra Manu, the embodiment of chaos and lies. The amulet's front depicts a winged figure radiating light, not the familiar Faravaha symbol, but a more abstract representation of divine energy. Streams of sacred fire curl around the edges, intersecting with 12 tiny stars representing the Amsha Spenta, Zoroastrian archangels governing elements like water, earth, and honest speech. Flip it over and the mood shifts dramatically. A serpent coils around a broken sword, its scales etched with minuscule curses in a cipher used by Zoroastrian priests to trap malignant spirits. This duality wasn't just decorative, it was functional. Worn against the skin, the amulet literally turned the wearer into a battlefield between cosmic forces, with the holy alloy believed to amplify Spenta Manu's power. The inscription, when finally deciphered, revealed a layered incantation. The outer ring quotes the Gathas Zoroaster's hymns, invoking protection through good thoughts, good words, good deeds. But the inner lines contain something rarer, a liturgical recipe for spiritual armor. Specific phrases correspond to Yasna ceremony chants, suggesting the amulet was charged through ritual before use. One phrase, Spenta Manu Vanghuya Dinaya, Holy Spirit of the Good Religion, appears alongside geometric patterns matching those found on temple walls where sacred fires burned. This wasn't just a prayer, it was a portable fire altar, its metal absorbing divine energy to shield the wearer in a world teeming with invisible threats. What makes this artifact revolutionary is how it personalizes Zoroastrian dualism. Most religious texts speak abstractly of light versus darkness, but here the struggle is made tactile. The electrum's gold-silver mix mirrors the faith's core philosophy, precious metals representing purity, blended to create something stronger than either alone. Even the chain holes show where patterns indicating it was hung at chest level, aligning with Zoroastrian beliefs that the heart was the seat of moral choice. Modern conservators found microscopic traces of myrrh and frankincense in its crevices, hinting at ceremonial anointing rituals that transformed jewelry into a theological statement. Yet the amulet also hints at everyday anxieties. Buried with a merchant whose bones showed signs of childhood malnutrition, it speaks to a man who rose from poverty but never shook the fear of losing divine favor. The serpent's presence, uncommon in Orthodox Zoroastrian art, suggests local adaptations, perhaps influences from Mesopotamian demonology encountered along trade routes. This tension between doctrine and personal belief makes the Spenta Maniou amulet more than a relic. It's a window into how ordinary people navigated a universe where every shadow could harbor chaos and every act of kindness strengthened the light. From the Cyrus Cylinder's groundbreaking declaration of human rights to the shimmering Jiroft Kaviani banner that rallied empires, these 30 artifacts aren't just relics, they're portals. Each one cracks open a different facet of ancient Persia's kaleidoscopic brilliance: the multicultural tapestries woven into the Oxus Treasure, the linguistic Rosetta stone of the Behistun inscription, the haunting faces of the salt men preserved by time's whims. Together, they paint a civilization that defies stereotypes, neither a monolithic war machine nor a fleeting glory, but a dynamic force that redefined power, artistry, and governance across millennia. Consider the radical implications of what we've uncovered. A cup, a tablet, or even a forged chess piece can rewrite entire chapters of history. The Persepolis Reliefs taught us that empire could celebrate diversity rather than erase it. The Spenta Maniou amulet revealed how faith intersected with daily survival. And those Persian robots, Herodotus's so-called mechanical marvels, prove that even ancient propaganda could spark innovations blurring the line between myth and engineering. These artifacts don't just belong to museums, they're mirrors reflecting our own world's tensions, conquest and coexistence, tradition and reinvention, the fragile dance between power and mercy. So here's the question that lingers after this journey. Which artifact shakes your understanding of the ancient world the most? Is it the subtle diplomacy of Darius's Egyptian statues, whispering how empires adapt to rule, or the Jiroft vases, teasing a lost civilization that might predate every textbook timeline? Maybe it's something quieter, like the Ecbatana tablet, proving bureaucracy could be as revolutionary as any sword. History isn't set in stone, it's a debate waiting for your voice. Drop your pick in the comments and let's keep unraveling these mysteries together. And if one artifact hooked you, dive deeper, because behind each of these 30 windows, 100 more stories are itching to be told. The past never stops speaking. Are you listening?